Okay, so I just want to thank you guys for coming and to tell you that it has been quite a holiday for all of us in some way, and no less for me than anyone else. But God's in control and He's on the throne. And so we are going to open up with prayer, and then we're going to talk about, do kind of an orientation on the book of Revelation. So let's pray. Father, I just thank you so much for John, for your servant who listened, who saw this incredible vision and determined in his heart to serve you fully. And so I pray today that you would help us to have real clear understanding. And Father, you would bless us and strengthen us to know what you have to say, and that we would be greatly encouraged by your word. I ask you for endurance and strength, and I pray, Lord, that you would be honored in this. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, so you guys have your books, and I gave you a chart. The folks that are not here, I will send the chart via email to you. So there are two different charts here. One is sort of a timeline. And as we know, in all things ancient history, the cross being in AD 30, maybe, I think it was a little later than that. But this is a generalized chart that's going to take you from the cross to 96 AD. Okay. Now, there's some events that are on this chart that you'll see that it's just information for you to have. You don't necessarily really need to know this, but I kind of think it's good to have some sort of information about that. The system of interpretation that you have here is on the back page. This is, I think, a much more important thing to know about, because it's going to give you the 5 basic positions of interpretation for the book of Revelation. So the preterism, historicism, futurism, idealism, and eclectic. Now, I have a very expanded definition of this if you want it, but really this is pretty much all you need to know. So unless you just really want to know more, which I always do. So, but the important thing about this is that we have different viewpoints about events in the book of Revelation because we are coming from particular positions. Sometimes we don't realize what our position is until we start really talking about it, and then we realize, well, maybe I'm really not in this. I might be over here in this other group. Now, it is not my job to tell you what group you should be in, okay, whether you're going to be idealistic or historian or whatever that might be. I am futurism. I am future. In other words, I believe in a pre-tribulation rapture. Now, there's definitions of that we're not going to get into at all in part 1. But I think it's important for you to know where I'm coming from if you don't come from that position, because I will probably say things that you don't agree with, okay? If you don't believe in a pre-trib rapture. And it's okay, we don't have to agree, but we just need to know what is the foundation that I'm coming from, okay? The next thing about that is that if you don't know who your commentator is, if you don't know what their position is, you're going to read things in commentaries that will be confusing to you if you're not a futurist. If you're an idealist, or if you are a futurist and you're reading something from a historicist position, they're going to say some things and you're going to go, how did they get that? Okay, so it just helps you if you have certain commentators that you like to use. I have a list of all the major guys, and I can tell you what their end times position is for the most part. So if you want to know that, I can tell you that. The guy that I use, I'm going to write his name down, and I recommend him. He's very what's the word I want to use? He's very technical. He is very much of a, you kind of feel like you're in college, kind of thing. He's a very analytical guy, but his name is Tony Garland. So I'm just going to write his name here so you know. That's the guy I use. So anything, and you can get it online and it is free. You can download it, you can use it. He's a futurist. I really like his way of presenting information. Not everybody wants things quite as analytical as I do. And so if he's too analytical for you, there's a couple other, Thomas Constable, there's some other guys that are good. So the first thing I want to do is kind of familiarize you with your book. In your book, you're going to have observation worksheet for the book of Revelation, all 22 chapters in the back. And then you're going to have I don't know if the easy version has the book chart, but there is a book chart. These are, I'm so sorry, yes. There's in and out and precept. So just check, make sure you get the right one. So there is an observation worksheet that has the whole book. And then there is then there is something called a book chart or at a glance chart. And that chart is all the chapters are numbered, and it's going to say, what does this book mean? That kind of stuff. And I'm just looking at hers to see if it's in there. But if you don't have it, I will explain it to you and get you what you need. The best way to do this study is to actually work from the observation worksheet. That's the best way to do anything with any kind of precept material. For you guys who have never charted anything or worked from a kind of an analytical position or a very methodical, systematic way of looking at scripture, this is hard. This is hard for you because you just want to get right in there and find out and get the answer and move on to the next thing. But what happens is that because especially we're talking about this type of book, what happens is that we end up with unintentional gaps of understanding, and we don't connect things well. We don't understand why this is, chapter 2 and 3 are where it is versus chapter 4 and 5. Because I've always said, if I was writing the Bible, I wouldn't write it like this. I'm gonna go for the jugular guy. I'm gonna get all the bad stuff out first, and all the good stuff's gonna come later, or whatever it might be. I want to make sure everybody knows, So, but that's not the way this book is written, and it isn't just what books are in the Bible. It's also why they are where they are in the Bible. I mean, there's actually, an ordained divine reason for that. It's also ordained as why we have the beginning, a middle, and an end. And a lot of that has to do with something very simple. God speaks to us simply in common language that we can understand. And he is not erratic. He didn't write 65 books of the Bible one way and decide to write the last book of the Bible in a totally different way. He intends for us to understand. So if we're not understanding something, it's not because God doesn't want us to understand it. It's because we just don't understand it for a whole variety of reasons. Okay, there's a lot of reasons why. So we're not intended to have, I wish I could just stand next to the brightest person I know and just absorb their information. But we can't do that. It's just really a bummer that we cannot do that. So I'm going to start by asking you, and by the way, if you got my email, if you got email information from me, you have my email address. And if you have questions, you can send me an email or you can call me if you have my phone number to ask me questions about what we're doing. The most important thing that we can do is not get overwhelmed, pace yourself, and recognize this is a 4-part study. We are not going to resolve everything in part 1. We're just going to talk about 3 chapters of the Bible. That's all we're really talking about in part 1. It's going to take 10 weeks to do it, and we're going to understand what's going on in those 7 churches. So we're just going to not worry. No worry. Okay. So what I want to ask you guys is, as I was thinking about this, and when I was in my recovery and delusional state, and I was having lots of prayer time about the book of Revelation, the first prayer being, am I going to be okay in time to do this? That was the first one. But I think that, and I think, Marty, you're going to agree with me, because she's done Revelation before with me. It is totally different this time. The circumstances that we're in are different. Our attitude about what we see is different. And have done this, I've taught this, I think, 3 times. I've taught Revelation. This will be, I think, my 4th time. It's totally different. My orientation is totally different than the last one. I looked it up. I look at my orientation to see, totally different. And it's because the word is living and it changes and it meets us where we're at. And our circumstances are so different than they were. I mean, it's really different than it was. And so we're a lot more attuned to these things. So I asked some questions and you guys can answer. The first question I wrote was, what do we know about Revelation? What do we know about it?
God's wanting us, he's telling us what's going to happen.
Okay. Anything else that we know about Revelation?
Written by John.
It's written by John. Okay. And I just want to ask you, where do we believe we are in relation to the prophecy of Revelation? Where do we think we are?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Things that are happening in the world are kind of coalescing to a point where you believe that this is the beginning of the end time.
Yeah. How many people in here agree with that? Pretty much, right? Okay, so let me ask you this question. These are all questions I asked myself. How does that impact us? Why does that matter to us now?
It makes Revelation more real. It's not in the far distant future. It's actually starting now.
But I think it also makes us a lot more introspective. Where am I? Where is my heart? Where is my, my views about what's going on around me, and how am I going to react to what's going on?
That is exactly right. So does that tell us that we're in the right place to study?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that the question that I asked myself, and I really had to think about this too, and this is, let me get to my chapter here, since I so unbelievably have my Bible at home. We just finished studying Isaiah. We spent a year in Isaiah, and wow. I mean, I could just go back and do it again. It was just so amazing, so fantastic. But the question that, after I asked these other questions of myself, and this is me asking myself, I asked myself, why are some things easy to understand and other things seem so hidden in Revelation? And so I started researching that, and I came up with Isaiah 29, verses 9 through 14. And it says, be delayed and wait. Blind yourselves and be blind. They become drunk, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with strong drink. For the Lord has poured over you a spirit of deep sleep. He has shut your eyes, the prophets. He has covered your heads, the seers. The entire vision will be to you like words of a sealed book, which when they give it to the one who is literate, saying, please read this, he will say, I cannot, for it is sealed. Then the book will be given to the one who is illiterate, saying, please read this, and he will say, I cannot read. Then the Lord said, because this people draw near with their words and honor me with their lip service, but they remove their hearts far from me, and their reverence for me consists of tradition learned by rote. Therefore, behold, I will once again deal marvelously with this people, wondrously, marvelously, and the wisdom of their wise men will perish, and the discernment of their discerning men will be concealed. So the question, I had to ask myself is, do I believe? The reason why things are hard to understand is if you don't have the Holy Spirit within you, you can't understand it.
And your heart's not in the right place.
Your heart's not in the right place. So we also have to recognize our limited ability to understand where we are, what we know, what our experiences are. So all of that led me, yes,
Hey, this is Chris. Hey, can you please say the reference one more time? I apologize for interrupting.
that's okay. Isaiah 29, verses 9 through 14.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm so glad to hear from you, Chris. So
I've been praying for you. Love you. Thanks.
thank you so much. Okay. So all of that brought me to ask a question that I have not asked before. Who is John?
The beloved disciple.
Okay, what do we know about him? Tell me things you know about John. We started a little while ago.
He was the closest to Jesus.
He was beloved of Jesus, right?
In Revelation, it describes him as bondservant.
The bondservant of Jesus, absolutely. What else do we know about John?
He was in prison.
He was imprisoned. Anything else? Go ahead.
He's the one that Jesus charged with taking care of his mother Mary.
Absolutely. So that means, where was he when Jesus
At the
died?
cross.
He was the only one at the cross. The only one. And when I started kind of looking at John, I began to see him in a totally different light. We spent a lot of time in Bible study talking about Paul. We know all about Paul. And Paul was raised in Tarsus. He was a Pharisee. He was a Roman citizen. He was a family of means. He, had, I think he is a lot like a lot of us, got a good intellect, we smart, and God had to get us, and drive us into the ground so we would confess, all that. But John is a totally different kind of guy. So I looked up. Now, like I said, I don't like giving dates as exact because we know that things can be off a little bit by a year or two or whatever it might be. But John was born approximately 6 AD, okay? And by the way, I'd never had a clear understanding of BC and AD, so I looked that up to make sure I understood what that meant. He was pretty young in comparison to the other disciples. They believe that he died about 100 AD, and that he was, based upon this numbering system, he was probably 94 when he died. He was 94 when he died, probably 94 to 96. I think he might have been a little bit older, but he was in his 90s. He was born in the first 5 or 6 years of the first century, okay? He was the only apostle known to die of old age. He did not die a martyr. He was tortured, things happened to him, but he didn't die of that. He was probably the youngest person of the 12, probably the youngest, when he began following Jesus. And he was the last to write any of the New Testament documents that we see in Scripture. So John, the Gospel of John was probably written between 80 and 84 AD. And when I started looking at this, I began to really, when I went back and read John 1:1, I was like, wow, what a different kind of disciple he was. It's incredible. So he wrote the Gospel of John between 80 and 84. He wrote 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John between 86 and 89 AD. And he wrote Revelation between 94 and 96 AD. I'd say about 95 probably. He and his older brother, James, were originally followers of John the Baptist. So I just thought that was really something to think about. Paul was raised very religious, very devout, a Pharisee. You can't get more conservative and more radical than that. And his goal, You have them in your church, right? To defend the truth at all costs, right? Which is our attitude to have. We should be defending the truth. But he was a very, what's the word I want to use? What's a word you would use to describe Paul? Rabid, radical. He had no hope, no talk, totally intolerant of anything that did not completely follow the law, the Torah. But John and his older brother James, John being the youngest of the 12, and James, were originally followers of John the Baptist. So these were guys who wanted to know who the Messiah was. They were not educated, they were fishermen, they were just regular guys. They didn't have all the background that somebody like, we're all very attracted to Paul because we see ourselves in Paul. But I really was endeared to John because I thought, here's this young guy who just wants to serve God. He really has a heart for the Lord. And when he's with John the Baptist, what is John the Baptist teaching? Repentance, repentance. And he's busy getting dipped and repenting, right? Because he wants to be right. And when Jesus comes, he's probably there, and he hears John declare Jesus as the Lamb of God who takes away the sins of the world. And Jesus calls him and his brother James, and they begin following him. So this is a guy, his whole life probably was about 17, I think, maybe or so, when he started following Jesus. Might have been a little younger, a little older, but a teenager to a very young adult. His whole adult life is serving God. Think about that. That's amazing. He's an amazing guy. And so he was probably related to Jesus through their mother, Salome. This is not proven, but Mark 16:1 says that she was a sister of Mary. So maybe he and Jesus were cousins. Don't know for sure, but we see that he has a connection to the family. There are some very important historical events that happened in this 100-year time frame that we should know about. And they start with Augustus, who was the first emperor of Rome. So if you guys don't know this, before Augustus, Rome was a republic. So it was run by the Senate. Octavian, who became Augustus, changed the law and became the king or the emperor of Rome. He was the first one. He died about AD 14. So he was ruling during the very beginning of this century. What Roman emperors did, Roman rulers did it too when they were a republic, but what an emperor would do is whoever he wanted to follow him, if it was his own son or whoever it was, he officially adopted that person as his son. So Tiberius, who was one of his sons by, I think, a third wife, I believe, he wanted Tiberius to rule. So he adopted Tiberius to be his son. So he's announcing to the Roman Empire that this guy's going to be the next one. Tiberius died in 37 AD. And then his uncle, Tiberius adopted Caligula, and he became emperor, and he died in 41 AD. They didn't really stay in office very long, you can see. Then comes Claudius. Claudius is the guy that we are most familiar with in the New Testament, okay? So in AD 43, he invaded Britain. And in AD 49, which relates to Acts chapter 2, Claudius expelled the Jews from Rome, from the city of Rome, because they were proselytizing this crazy stuff. And so he died in 54 AD, and he adopted Nero. So Nero became the next emperor. Nero was a particularly sick individual. He married, I think he had 5 or 6 wives. 2 were men. He actually took one of his servants who looked like one of his wives that had died, eunuched the man, and married him to be his wife. He was a very creepy, horrible person. He became emperor at 16. When he became 21, his mother, who made sure that he got adopted to become the next emperor, was married to Claudius. He had his mother executed because she was getting in the way. So he wanted to make sure that he was in complete control. He died in 68 AD. Now he's the guy who killed most of the apostles. He killed Peter, he killed Paul, you know, he was busy. Andrew, all these guys, he's taken them out. He died about 68 AD by committing suicide because he thought that they were going to come get him and pull him off the throne. And, you know, I could see why. Then there were 3 other emperors, Galba, Otho, and Vitellius. I think it's on your chart, your timeline chart, they're listed. I wouldn't have done that again if I hadn't realized that that was in there. This was the Julian clan. So all 5 of these, or 1, 2, 3, yeah, all 5 of these emperors were from the same family. Then there were 3 other emperors who didn't last very long. They were taken out pretty quickly. And then we get to Vespasian, who died in 79 AD. Titus was his son. He died in 81 AD. And Titus is the one who destroyed the Jewish temple in Jerusalem in 70 AD. This was done during a Jewish-Roman war. And the war started in 42 AD, and there were over 1 million civilians that were killed. 10,000 Roman soldiers were killed, and 250,000 Jewish soldiers were killed, okay? This war went from about 42 AD to 73 AD. What's going on in the Middle East at that time? What's happening? What are the disciples doing?
They're founding churches.
Founding churches in the middle of a huge Jewish-Roman war. They're going into cities. Why was Paul attacked so much by the Romans? Why were these guys chased after? Because there was a war going on. It wasn't just that they were coming in and saying something people didn't like, which was a big enough deal all by itself. But there were a total of 3 Jewish-Roman wars that happened within the first 300 years of the cross. And this was the first of them. And a lot of people were dying, and it was very dangerous and very difficult to go from town to town for these apostles. It's incredible what God did in that period of time. I have so much respect for what they went through. But Titus was the son of Vespasian. He died in 81 AD. He destroyed the temple. Domitian was the younger brother. He was assassinated in 96 AD. And he was the one who went after John. So these guys were going through all of these things, and we get to this place, and this is the thing that I am so incredibly impressed with. And it says it as soon as I find my little, here it is. So we know all this stuff. Sorry if I'm out of the camera. We know all this stuff about John, what an incredible guy he was, how faithful he was. And so having looked at all this, I read John 1:1. And it starts totally different than the other gospels, doesn't it? It says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God, and the Word was with God, and the Word came down and dwelt among men. Having done all this research, and I have tons more, obviously, all this research, and to think about who is this guy that Jesus picks to give this revelation. Here's the other thing we need to know. Was he a prophet? He wasn't. When you read the Gospel of John, he's writing the gospel. He's talking about Jesus. When you read 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, what is he saying? Love one another, right? He does talk about the Antichrist. He does talk about signs of things, but he's not really a prophet. Now, we just finished Isaiah. Remember what Isaiah 6 told us? What did God tell Isaiah? Go and preach to a people who will not hear you. His entire life. And I was thinking about that. I'm thinking, you know, here's Isaiah. He's on his 3-year stint of nakedness. And I'm sure his wife said one day, could you put your pants on for dinner? You know? I mean, you've been walking around naked for 3 years. Your kids are named prophetic names, so every time they call out the name of one of your kids or prophesying something, I mean, can you imagine what that was like for him? For his wife and his children, and he was what? The nephew of the king, of King Uzziah. His dad was King Uzziah's brother. He's going into the house of God, and he's going into the king's house, and they're all like, there he comes again. Good God, what is he doing? Right? Here is John, who faithfully serves from the time of probably 17, the Lord. And at this point that this is being written, he's been exiled to the island of Patmos. He is, tradition says, boiled in oil. He has been tortured. And I'm just going to start in verse 10 of chapter 1. It says, and I was in the Spirit on the Lord's day, and I heard behind me a loud voice, like the sound of a trumpet, saying, write in a book what you see, and send it to the 7 churches, to Ephesus and to Smyrna and to Pergamum and to Thyatira and Sardis and to Philadelphia and Laodicea. And I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me, and having turned, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And in the middle of the lampstands, one like a son of man, clothed in a robe, reaching to the feet, and girded across his breast with golden girdle. And his head and his hair were white like sand, white like white wool, like snow, and his eyes were like a flame of fire. And his feet were burnished bronze, and as it had been caused to glow in a furnace, and his voice was like the sound of many waters. And in his right hand he held 7 stars, and out of his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword, and his face was like the sun shining in its strength. And here is what he did. And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as a dead man. And he laid his right hand upon me, saying, do not be afraid. I'm the first and the last, and the living one. And I was dead. And behold, I'm alive forevermore. And I have the keys of death and Hades. Having thought about John this way and reading that, what kind of a guy is John? What does that tell you about him?
He's respectful, not the right word, but overly respectful.
He's a humble guy.
Yeah.
He is not self-motivated at all. He's not a guy that is looking for any kind of accolade. Why did God give this prophecy to John? Why do you think he did? Because John's not a prophet.
Because he was faithful.
Because of his faithfulness, and because if you were given, there's something to be said about, if you were given a prophecy like this, would you be ready for it? What's going to happen to John as a result of sending out this letter? The 7 churches are going to receive it.
Some of them are not going to be happy about it.
Not going to be happy. John has been preaching his whole life, love one another, be faithful to God, exercise the fruit of the Spirit, right? Don't let the lust of the eyes or the lust of the flesh or the boastful pride of life get the best of you. And so as I thought about that, I thought about why I'm studying Revelation again. Why am I studying Revelation again? And I realized, because now God's speaking to the church. What does he have to say to us? What are we listening to? What are we doing with this information that he's giving us? Sorry.
Are we listening?
Are we
Bottom
listening?
line.
Okay, are we listening? So is this about getting our homework done? I mean, I want you to get your homework done. Don't misunderstand me. I really want you to do the homework. But is this study about accomplishing a task?
No.
No. It's about hearing what God has to say to the church. And we're in the times where we need to know, right? So who is Revelation intended for?
It's written to the 7 churches.
Thank you. So this letter is written to us. So when we look at it, maybe we need to put my name in some of those spots. Have I left my first love? We need to ask ourselves those questions. The next question is, how do we gain, if Revelation is intended for the church, how do we gain revelation? How do we understand it? Who is Jesus in Revelation? It's kind of a hard question because we haven't studied it yet, right? He is the source. He is the object of the study, and he is the incarnation of God as man to us. So how do we respond to what we read in Revelation? That's kind of a generalized question. I'm not asking for, but I want us to think about this. How are we going to respond to what we know? I'm not asking for a right or wrong answer. Okay.
You study, you open your mind, and you open your heart to what God reveals
Right.
To you in this, and just pray that the blindness
Falls away.
would fall away.
Total true understanding.
Okay, and the thing is, what I wrote down for myself is, we have to understand by faith. You know, faith is what births new life to the soul. That's a quote from Tony Garland. I thought Revelation is not about me telling you how much I know. And it's not about you telling other people how much you know. It's about finding out, where do I stand? If I believe, we all raise your hand and said, we're in the last days. What has to change in our approach to the truth that we know? We have to do it by faith, and we have to recognize this is not about letting everybody know how smart you are. I'm pretty smart. So what? Being smart doesn't get you into heaven, and it doesn't save people. So I saw something else that I thought was really interesting, and I don't know if I completely wrote it properly regarding the Trinity, which we're going to see in chapter 1 big time. But this was a definition: the perfect harmony of cooperation to effect God's purposes. The Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit have a perfect cooperation for the purposes of fulfilling God's plan. So that's a good definition to me of the Trinity, because it looks like Jesus is lesser than, or the Holy Spirit is, we kind of get this picture, but they are perfect Trinity, one God. And so when we look at this, we want to ask ourselves, am I studying for the right reasons? And I keep saying that because we're going to get bogged down. I guarantee you. Marta knows. I hate to keep pointing you out there, Marta, I'm sorry.
It's a good bar down.
It's a good bog down. We're going to get tied into things, and we're going to want to defend our positions. I'm not here to change your position on anything. I'm here to help us personally understand what revelation means to me, for me, with my family, and with the walk that I'm going to be facing as the time grows short. Something else about revelation that I had never thought about until now. Revelation tells us that God's got a time clock. He's got a limit. We tend to think that the limit is not in my lifetime. I want to know about these things, but I don't want to go through it. And we look at John's life and look what he went through but you don't hear him. The way he describes Jesus, the way he describes his walk, the way he describes the church is an incredible picture of a man who 110,000 bazillion gazillion % sold out. That's who I want to be. And I want to study so that I know I've planned for, I understand it's coming, and I'm sold out. So that's really all I have today. I have no idea even what time it is. Oh, we can be early. It's just orientation. Is there any questions that anyone has? Is there anything that you're looking at in your book, or we're going to do lesson 1 next week. And so I'm going to do that a little bit differently also. I'm going to send out a chart, or have Kay send out a chart for that week's work. We're going to actually follow the same chart. You probably have some of those charts because I think I did that before.
I pulled Revelation 1 out of a notebook that's about this big. And that has all 4 parts in it. And I need to go back in there and really pull.
Get your another observation worksheet and start over.
Yeah.
That's the one thing you should do. Those of you that have studied before, stick to that observation worksheet. Mine looks like this. This is one of my older ones. And on it is, if you can see that, can they see that?
Yes.
Okay. On it, I've written and charted it. This is the one study where you really want to use that observation worksheet. The other thing is that we use an observation worksheet with the same translation, because in the book of Revelation, there are so many words that are translated differently in different, New American Standard versus New King James versus NIV versus EVS versus, they all have different uses of certain words. And in something like this, because we're doing prophecy, we want to make sure we're reading the same thing so that we don't get taken off on a tangent about why something says eagle instead of angel, like it does in Revelation 14. That, you could spend weeks discussing why that is. That is not the purpose, to debate things like that. We want to make sure it is a very secondary issue in comparison to the entire book of Revelation, believe me. But we're going to do lesson 1, and then I'm going to have every week, I don't know if I'm going to email it to you or if I'm going to just have them here, copies of a chart, and we're going to use kind of the same chart to work through the homework. And the reason I'm doing that is because I've just found over the years it's more efficient to get to the questions and answers that we want to talk about, rather than kind of flailing around with a lot of esoteric questions to try to get you to see what I'm trying to ask you. I'm just going to say it straight up. What is this, and what do you think about that? Right? So, I don't think the last lesson, I think is 10 weeks. Lesson 10 is ridiculously long. It's crazy long. I keep, every time I do, I think, why am I not writing them and asking them to split this up into 2? But we're going to have that last lesson kind of set up where we can work through that rather efficiently also. Then the plan is to go to part 2, right after part 1. Now, I'm going to augment part 2 a little bit. I'm going to combine a couple lessons into one because I think they should be one, because I want to end by the last Monday in May, if I can. That's what I want to do. So we're going to have to compress a couple of chapters, a couple of lessons into one, and they can be, I've done it enough to know that does not have to be drug out quite so much. But part 2 is just an overview. We're not doing any interpretation. We're not doing any cross-referencing at all that I can think of. And I think, did I bring it with me? Probably didn't. We are going to do part 3 and part 4 will be Old Testament and New Testament cross-references. And that is where you're going to work your tails off, flat out. But you will be ready. And I'm kind of excited to see where we're gonna be by the time we get to there. Because I want to start part 3 in the fall. I don't think I can do part 3 and 4 in one semester unless we start really early in the fall, but maybe. I think it's gonna be exciting. Okay, is there any questions anyone has, looking through the notes or anything that anyone might want to? Okay, so let's just take a minute here before we close and let you guys introduce yourselves to each other and just tell you 2 seconds about each other. You're on it.
I'm Hopi Cheney. We're new to this area. We moved here in April. Kind of boring. There's not much to say about it.
That's all right. You're not boring. There's nothing boring about Opie.
And Cathy, I was researching someone to do my nails when I found her, and I'm so excited that I did.
Yeah, I think the very first appointment, it was like, well, are you in a Bible study? Everybody who goes to me knows that's what I do.
Yeah, but I love it. I'm excited about it. So,
Okay, Pam?
I'm moved here about a year ago. Fairly new with kids, yeah. Prayed. I didn't, forgive me, but I didn't want to do the Asian Buddha meal people.
You didn't want to do
I
what?
didn't want to do the Asian people for meals. And I'm like, Lord, and I went to probably close to 10 different places. So, like, Lord, I really can't be a lady. So I went online and out of the blue popped up.
I'm blue.
Well, that's an interesting name for a nail salon. I wonder what kind of person would do that. And then a week later, I go back in and out of the blue pops up again. And right around the corner from the chiropractic office, it was like literally 30 seconds to get from one to the other. And I walked in and I happened. And since then, because I've been praying for a long time to have good, true Christian people and belong to that, a Bible study with them. Now I'm in 2, and get to carry her books for her. To me, that's a big deal.
It is a big deal. It's a big deal.
But it's amazing. I mean, even sitting in here now earlier when we first started, I just thought, look where I am. I know I'm not in the Taj Mahal, but look where I am.
Yeah.
Look where I am spiritually. You know, I kind of went from to
All over the books. Yeah.
wow. And I don't want to belabor anything, but I do have a little bit of a memory problem. It's mitochondria. It's not, thank God, dementia or anything like that. So sometimes if I'm just, it's just not there. And I'm on protocol, and I just have to keep doing it apparently for a while. So if it seems a little arrogant, sometimes that's what's happening. So
I don't
was like,
think
what?
it's
Just
excuse.
kidding.
Dang it, you don't have that excuse, do you? Dang.
That's okay. I'm Marta Howie, and I'm not new to the area. We moved from the Panhandle about 35 years ago to Buda, Texas. I've been doing these precept Bible study things with Cathy for quite a while now. Since we were meeting at the Prather's house.
Gosh.
And Covenant was the first study I did with y'all. And from that point on, I was hooked.
Yeah.
I was hooked. I'm a registered nurse. I'm supposedly retired. I work in PRN shifts still, but that I'm about to pull the trigger to
Cut it off.
Yeah. So,
You do a lot. I mean, she's very busy. She acts like, but
I'm Operation Christmas Child Project Leader and Drop-Off Leader at our church at Manchac Baptist Church. So we do year-round Operation Christmas Child.
that's a big deal.
And and I have 4 kids, and they're all grown and 1 grandchild. You think out of 4 kids, I could get more than 1, but it doesn't look like it.
Dang.
We
Well-
both live here. We both live here.
She lives across the highway from you though.
Okay, Yeah. I live over in the Cimarron area on off 967. It's kind of between 1626 and 967.
Yes, yes, I live in Central.
Yeah.
So,
Awesome.
Central, Lindsay Rivers from the whole thing they were advertising. Everybody seems to know it by that. I think that's funny, I guess, which I don't. Anyway, east of 35, just so there's.
So Nina?
One of my fours.
Nina Brookshire, we moved here about a year ago. My husband actually went to high school and college here.
Oh, wow.
My daughter lives here, 2 of our grandkids. As soon as I got here, I started looking for a precept class because I had been studying precept in San Angelo for 3 years. And it was between this class and what did y'all do in January, March? The lady in Dripping
Mark,
Springs?
yeah. Yeah, she was gonna go to the other one, maybe.
Yeah, I wanted to go the other one because I said, Isaiah, I'm not ready for that. Well, it turns out that every Friday, which is when that class meets, I couldn't go. And so I said, okay, God, Isaiah it is. So that's why I've been here, and it's been incredible. It really has.
You're not for Isaiah.
I wasn't up for Isaiah, but I got it done. So I guess he thought I was up for
No
it.
more procrastinating.
Yes.
Okay, and the folks that are online, we'd like to hear from you. You want me to call out who goes first? Let's see. Charlene, do you want to tell us about you? Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Tell us about you. Charlene?
Yeah. Okay. I'm 80 years old. I'm retired and I live at Creekside Villas in Buda. And I met you, Cathy, through Kay, the other lady that works with you that gets it, puts it on the computer.
Right.
And I don't know how, I think the first Bible study I did with you was Jude.
Yeah.
And about the 3rd or 4th lesson, I thought, no, this is too deep for me. I can't do it. But guess what? I'm still doing them with you.
Right.
So
Awesome.
yeah, God meant for me to be here. I'm at the right place.
That's awesome.
I believe that. That's it.
Thank
And
you.
I'll be there. I'll come in person next time.
Okay. Okay, and how about you, Carol? Are you there, Carol? Or Vicky? Maybe they don't want to talk. Okay.
Okay, I'm here.
Okay, Vicky.
I'm not very tech savvy here.
Okay.
Uh,
All
Yes, I'm Miss Vicky and I live in Kyle, and this is the first precept I've done. It'll be the second Revelation study. And I was looking for a new manicurist. Sandy McDonald, whom you probably know, is a friend of mine, and she referred me to Out of the Blue. And of course, Bible is the discussion of the day every time I go and get my nails done. And I am looking forward to this study. I will be in person. I prefer to be in person, but Mike, I'm going to blame Mike, my husband, that I'm not there because he was concerned about the road conditions. So I plan to be on Zoom this time and in person next time.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Carol says she's here. She just can't get her mic to work.
Mic to work? Huh, okay. All right, Chris? Oh,
Hey,
hey.
is Carol needing to, go ahead, Carol.
Okay, just a second. I've got 2 things going here. I'm very technology challenged because I'm echoing. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Just 1 second. Let me just shut this one down. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I had to turn my volume down. Yes, I'm Carol Childress, and I am a native South Austinite, and I live in Buda. My husband and I have lived in Buda for, oh gosh, over 24 years. I guess, almost 24 years. I know Marty Knight well. We've known each other a long time through Manchac Baptist Church, and I had met Cathy many years ago. I have taken precept Bible studies in the past. I've took like 3 of them, and a long time ago. And so when Marta told me she was doing this, I was interested. And so I finally got hooked up, and I hesitated this morning because I'm not real good at Zoom meetings, but my husband came down and got it to work. So here I am. I'm glad I'm not on camera today, but I would like to plan on being there in person next time. I have 3 kids. I just had my 5th granddaughter, and if we can get my husband, my youngest son married, we might get a grandson sometime. So
Awesome. Thank you so much. Barbara, are you there? Barbara? Let me ask you to unmute. How about Jeannie? Are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. I don't even know where to start. I've known you for
Forever.
like 14 years, I guess. I was just going through all my Bible study books, and I found everyone but Revelation. No, I'm gonna have to get a book because I know I didn't throw that away. It's somewhere around.
Well, you got it somewhere.
So
She'll find it after she buys one.
yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. Me and Dave's been coming to you since Hattie, and that was
Yeah.
what, 2008, 9.
A lot of Bible.
We live in Spring Branch now, which is an hour from there. And we found a church out here we go to. Well, we haven't been going to. We've been doing it online since COVID, but and then we've been doing studies with Cathy since then. But I met Cathy also through. The first time I met was not even out of the blues. What was it called? When you were in that little building in San Marcos.
Well, that was out of the blue.
Okay, what was before that? I thought I met you in another building, not on the corner there, but the other one.
I don't know.
How long were you there? How long were you at that building?
12 years.
Oh, then maybe that's where.
Yeah.
But anyway, so that.
Are you going to try to drive in, or are you going to stay?
We're going to probably stay on Zoom for a while. Yeah. So your first 10 weeks is part 1, and then your second, when's part 2? What time frame is that?
Right after it, the very next week.
It goes through the summer, right?
Yeah, I'll send everybody out. Yeah, I'll be Zoom.
Okay.
Okay, well, I'm going to move on to Barbara, if she's able to talk.
Sure.
Hey,
Yeah,
Barbara, would you tell
I'm
us?
trying to figure out this mute thing.
All right.
I'm Barbara Bolliard, and I live in Smithville. That's why I'm doing it by Zoom. I was excited when Cathy was going to do it by Zoom, since I don't want to drive that far. And
Yeah.
of course, Cathy does our worship at Calvary Chapel Bastrop. So I've just always enjoyed talking to Cathy about the Bible, because she knows so much. And so I'm looking forward to this Revelation study, especially what you said about what it is to us personally. That's going to be interesting. So I'm looking forward to it.
I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much.
Here.
Okay, and so I'm gonna see if Chris is able to say anything. I think you're the last one, Chris.
Hey, I hope you can hear me.
Yes,
Okay,
we can hear you.
okay, great. I'm Chris Mannion. My husband and I and our youngest daughter have enjoyed the evening Bible studies kind of off and on. Unfortunately, we lost both my parents 2017, 2018, and we've been in full-blown transitioning their businesses and whatnot since then. And so, but we've been off and on with Cathy and love the Zoom and love the YouTube. Thanks so much, Cathy, for making that available. And I'll be attending by Zoom, and we will be watching on Wednesday evenings by YouTube as a family. So we have 3 kiddos, 2 are grown and married. We have our first grandchild who turned 1 this past November. And she is the light of our lives, no doubt. Waited a long time to be a grandmother and just loving it every bit I can until this silly COVID hit. And so, but we do Zoom and distance visits. So loving Revelation. We kind of did it off and on before with Cathy. I think that's when Mom and Dad started getting so sick, Cathy. I can't remember. But we lost my parents less than 5 months from each other. So it was really a lot of ICU, ER visits for many, many years, it felt like. So just thrilled to be here, and thanks for making this available. Looking forward to getting to know the morning ladies. I did a little bit of the morning when it was the 40-minute devotional. So excited now that we're digging deep in the morning. So nice to meet y'all.
So great to have you. I'm so glad to hear from you, Chris. Chris is the only one who didn't like any of the typical meetings. We met through a mutual friend. Chris and I met through a mutual friend, so which was great.
And sorry, I couldn't hear what you said, Cathy. It kind of had a feedback. So tell me later, okay? But couldn't hear you at all. Sorry.
Okay. All right. So, Marta, if you, I'm going to close it. Okay. So, thank you everyone for telling me who you are. And we want to close this prayer. And like I said, if you have questions, you have anything that you need to ask me, please don't hesitate. I'll just send you over to Marta because she.
And I'll ask Daryl.
Because he will know. So, okay, let's close with prayer. Father, I just thank you so much for all that you've done today. And I pray that you would just give us peace about the study and that we would enjoy and be excited about what we're going to learn. I pray that if anybody gets frustrated or feels like they can't do it, that Lord, you just remind them that you're their teacher, not me, not even that book. It's you that teaches us. And so I just pray that, Father, we would have hearts that desire to know your truth, to hear what you have to say, and to trust you with the outcome of our lives. I praise you and I thank you in Jesus' name. Amen. I will see you guys next week. Talk to you later.